Some confessions are spoken, others are written. But the most dangerous confession in this case was never meant to be found. Imagine a quiet church standing at the edge of a small American town, its weathered walls carrying decades of forgotten prayers and memories. For generations, people walked through its wooden doors searching for hope, forgiveness, and peace. Then one ordinary morning, a renovation crew began tearing away sections of an old interior wall that had remained untouched for more than 70 years. No one expected history to answer back. Hidden behind loose bricks sat a small wooden box sealed tightly with rusted nails, its surface stained by age and dust. Inside rested a faded cassette tape with only 7 handwritten words across its label. "If you're listening, I'm already gone." One of the workers found an old cassette player in a storage room, wiped years of dust from its buttons, and pressed play. A trembling voice emerged from the speaker, barely louder than a whisper. It struggled through a few sentences, sounding frightened, exhausted, and burdened by something too heavy to carry any longer. Then, just before revealing the name everyone had been waiting to hear, the recording stopped. Silence filled the room. The tape had been damaged, leaving behind only questions. Who recorded it? Why had someone hidden it inside a church wall? And what truth was so dangerous that it remained buried for decades? Before we go deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Because by the end of today's story, everything you believe about guilt, truth, and justice will be challenged in ways you never expected. There are towns across America where time seems to move more slowly than anywhere else. Places where neighbors wave from their front porches, children still ride bicycles until sunset, and nearly everyone knows the stories behind every family name. Maple Creek was one of those towns. Home to fewer than 8,000 residents, it appeared to be the kind of place people dreamed about when they wanted to escape crowded cities and complicated lives. The streets were quiet. The annual Harvest Festival filled the town square every autumn. Friday night football games brought entire families together. Local businesses had served the same customers for generations. It was the kind of community where trust wasn't earned over months or years. It was inherited. Parents believed their children were safe walking home from school. Doors were often left unlocked. Strangers were noticed immediately because there were almost no strangers at all. At least, that was the image Maple Creek proudly presented to the outside world. Yet beneath its calm appearance rested a mystery that had refused to disappear for 15 years. A mystery people discussed only in hushed voices whenever the conversation drifted toward the one person whose absence never truly left the town behind. Her name was Emily Carter. She was 17 years old when she disappeared on what should have been one of the most ordinary afternoons of her life. Teachers remembered her as thoughtful, determined, and curious. Friends described her as someone who always carried a camera because she believed every ordinary moment could become an unforgettable memory. She dreamed of attending film school after graduation, hoping one day to tell meaningful stories that would inspire people across the country. Her parents remembered the little things most of all: the way she laughed while helping prepare dinner, the notes she left on the refrigerator before school, and her habit of taking photographs of sunsets because she insisted no 2 evenings ever looked exactly alike. On the afternoon she vanished. Classes ended as usual. Students poured into the parking lot. School buses departed. Parents arrived to collect their children. Emily was seen leaving campus alone. Then, without warning, every confirmed sighting ended. No witnesses came forward with useful information. No physical evidence pointed investigators toward a suspect. No body was ever found. It was as though she had simply stepped beyond the edge of the world, leaving behind only questions and heartbreak. The investigation consumed Maple Creek during those first weeks. Volunteers searched fields, forests, abandoned buildings, and nearby rivers. Helicopters flew overhead while search dogs followed trails that disappeared without explanation. Detectives interviewed classmates, teachers, neighbors, and complete strangers. Hundreds of tips arrived from concerned citizens, but each promising lead eventually collapsed under closer examination. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. National attention faded. Emily Carter was the kind of person every small town believed had a bright future waiting just beyond graduation. She consistently ranked near the top of her class, volunteered at the local food pantry every weekend, and carried a camera almost everywhere she went. While most teenagers used their phones to capture quick moments, Emily believed every photograph should tell a story. She often told her parents that one day she wanted to become a documentary filmmaker, traveling across America to uncover forgotten stories and give a voice to people whose experiences had been overlooked. Her family supported every dream she shared. Her friends admired her determination, and her teachers saw a student whose curiosity never seemed to fade. Among those teachers, one stood out more than anyone else. Michael Lawson was respected throughout Maple Creek. Calm, patient, and deeply committed to his students, he encouraged Emily's passion for storytelling and often praised her photography projects. To everyone around them, their relationship appeared completely ordinary. Yet as investigators later reviewed old class photographs and school records, small details began raising uncomfortable questions. In one photograph, Michael's expression lingered on Emily while everyone else looked toward the camera. During an old award ceremony, witnesses remembered an awkward pause when Emily seemed hesitant to accept congratulations from him. Then detectives discovered something even stranger. Emily's personal diary, recovered from her bedroom years earlier, contained one page that had been carefully torn out. No one knew what had been written there or who removed it. The missing page became one more piece of a puzzle that refused to fit together. And there was one final mystery investigators kept from the public. The last photograph Emily ever captured on her camera has never been released, because detectives believe it may have recorded something someone desperately wanted to keep hidden. On the afternoon Emily disappeared, nothing seemed out of place. School ended as students poured into the parking lot, laughing with friends and making plans for the weekend. Emily was seen leaving the building carrying her backpack and camera, smiling as she said goodbye to classmates. Security cameras followed her across the campus until she reached the edge of the parking area. Then, without explanation, she vanished from every camera angle. Investigators later discovered that only minutes before disappearing, Emily received a brief phone call. It lasted less than 30 seconds, but when it ended, she changed direction completely. Instead of taking her usual route home, she began walking toward the old church on the edge of Maple Creek. She was never seen again. For years, detectives believed she had simply disappeared somewhere along that route. But the discovery of the hidden cassette tape inside the church forced them to reconsider everything. As workers continued removing sections of the church wall, they uncovered a second concealed compartment. Inside were old photographs, handwritten letters, a rusted key, and a damaged journal, each appearing to connect directly to Emily's disappearance. Forensic specialists carefully examined every item. Most fingerprints belonged to the construction crew handling the renovation, but one print matched someone who still lived quietly in Maple Creek. The name stunned investigators. Michael Lawson, the respected teacher admired by generations of students. News spread quickly, and the town refused to believe it. Many insisted there had to be a mistake. Others demanded answers that no one could provide. Local journalist Sarah Bennett began conducting her own investigation, convinced the truth had remained hidden for far too long. Before authorities could question Michael, he unexpectedly announced his retirement after decades of teaching. 3 days later, he disappeared without leaving a single trace. Michael Lawson's disappearance transformed a quiet investigation into a nationwide search. His photograph appeared on television broadcasts, highway message boards, newspapers, and social media feeds across the country. Detectives believe that if Michael had fled, he was either running from the truth or searching for a way to finally confront it. Lead investigator Ethan Cole refused to accept easy answers. Instead of focusing only on Michael's disappearance, he returned to every piece of evidence collected over the previous 15 years. What he found was deeply unsettling. Witness statements had been filed away without proper follow-up. Several people who claimed they had seen unusual activity near the old church on the day Emily disappeared were interviewed only once and never contacted again. Even more surprising, phone records that could have revealed Emily's final movements had never been fully analyzed because of limitations in technology at the time. As Ethan carefully reconstructed the timeline, another forgotten detail surfaced. Just days after Emily vanished, an anonymous caller had contacted the police claiming to know where investigators should look. The caller sounded frightened and repeatedly insisted that officers were searching in the wrong place. Before explaining further, the caller suddenly hung up. Detectives attempted to trace the call, but failed, and with hundreds of tips arriving every week, the recording was eventually pushed aside and forgotten. Listening to it 15 years later, Ethan couldn't ignore one haunting realization. Whoever made that call seemed to know details that had never been released publicly. While Ethan re-examined the official investigation, journalist Sarah Bennett continued following a different trail. She spent days reviewing financial records connected to Emily's family and uncovered a discovery that raised even more questions. Every year since Emily disappeared, an anonymous donation had quietly arrived to help her parents pay household expenses and support local missing person organizations. The amount was never large enough to attract attention, but it always arrived on the exact anniversary of Emily's disappearance. After tracing bank transfers through years of paperwork, Sarah finally identified the source. Michael Lawson. He had never spoken about the donations, never accepted recognition, and never revealed his identity to Emily's family. The discovery divided the town almost immediately. Some believed the payments were driven by overwhelming guilt. Others argued they reflected compassion from a teacher who never stopped grieving for one of his students. A few wondered if the donations were part of a much larger secret designed to keep suspicion away from someone else entirely. Before anyone could question Michael about the money, police received an urgent report from a park ranger working near a remote forest several hours outside Maple Creek. Hidden beneath tall trees sat Michael's abandoned pickup truck. There were no signs of violence, no footprints leading away from the vehicle, and no indication of where he had gone. But resting carefully on the passenger seat was another old cassette tape with Michael's name written across the label. Investigators rushed it back to the evidence lab, uncertain whether they were about to hear the confession they had waited 15 years to uncover. When detectives finally played the recording, Michael's voice sounded weaker than before, as though years of silence had slowly worn him down. He admitted that for 15 years he had carried a truth that never allowed him a single peaceful night. Yet almost immediately, his confession became far more complicated than anyone expected. Michael stated clearly that he had never taken Emily's life. He repeated those words several times, almost as if he expected no one would believe him. But moments later, he admitted that he had hidden important evidence, remained silent when he should have spoken, and spent years protecting someone whose identity he refused to reveal. His voice trembled as he described the weight of living with a decision that haunted him every day. Near the end of the recording, he paused for several long seconds before speaking one sentence that left investigators completely stunned. The person everyone trusted most was never me. Then the tape ended abruptly. No names were mentioned. No explanation followed. The recording answered one question while creating countless new ones. Determined to understand what Michael meant, Sarah returned to visit retired Pastor Thomas Reed, who revealed a secret he had guarded for years. Long before the cassette tapes were discovered, someone had privately confessed inside the old church. Bound by the sacred responsibility of confidentiality, Thomas never revealed the person's identity while he was alive. However, knowing the truth might someday be needed, he left handwritten notes to be opened after his death. Those notes pointed investigators toward a hidden journal concealed inside the church walls. Together, the journal and Thomas's final writings revealed an astonishing truth. The confession had never come from Michael Lawson. It came from a respected community leader, someone celebrated for years as a symbol of honesty and generosity. Michael's greatest mistake was not committing the crime, but believing that protecting the truth would spare innocent families from unbearable pain. Instead, his silence allowed an innocent family to live without answers, a grieving town to place its trust in the wrong person, and a terrible secret to remain hidden for 15 long years. Armed with the evidence hidden for so many years, Detective Ethan Cole officially reopened Emily Carter's case. Advances in forensic science made it possible to recover a complete DNA profile from preserved evidence that investigators had been unable to analyze 15 years earlier. The results finally answered the question that had haunted Maple Creek for more than a decade. The DNA matched the respected community leader whose private confession had remained hidden behind the walls of the old church. But the truth arrived with a painful reality. The man responsible had died several years before the investigation was reopened, taking with him the opportunity to stand before a courtroom and answer for his actions. There would be no dramatic arrest, no trial, and no guilty verdict. For Emily's family, justice would never look the way they had imagined during countless sleepless nights. Guided by the newly uncovered evidence, investigators searched an isolated piece of land connected to the suspect's past. There, after years of uncertainty, they finally found Emily's remains. Although nothing could erase the pain her family had endured, they were finally able to bring her home and lay her to rest with the dignity she deserved. The entire town gathered for a memorial unlike any Maple Creek had ever witnessed. Tears were shared not only for a young life taken too soon, but also for the years lost believing the wrong story. Families who had once admired the real perpetrator struggled to accept that someone they trusted so completely had carried such a devastating secret. Others looked back with regret, wondering whether they had judged Michael Lawson too quickly simply because the circumstances seemed impossible to ignore. As the investigation came to its quiet conclusion, one lesson echoed louder than every headline and every rumor that had spread through Maple Creek over the years. Sometimes guilt belongs to those who never committed the crime. Sometimes silence gives the guilty exactly what they need to escape suspicion. And sometimes the loudest confession is not the one spoken before a courtroom, but the one hidden away where no one is ever meant to hear it. Months later, forensic experts managed to restore the damaged portion of the very first cassette tape discovered inside the church wall. For the first time, investigators heard Michael Lawson's final words exactly as he had recorded them years before. His tired voice whispered, "I stayed silent because I believed I was protecting everyone. But silence only protected the truth." Those words became the final piece of a mystery that had changed an entire town forever. They served as a reminder that loyalty without honesty can leave innocent people suffering for years, and that truth delayed often becomes justice denied. Before this story ends, we'd like to hear your thoughts. If you had discovered those hidden cassette tapes, would you have trusted Michael Lawson, or would you have believed he was guilty? Was his silence an act of loyalty, or was it a terrible mistake that allowed the truth to remain hidden for far too long? And can someone carry the weight of guilt without ever committing the crime itself? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because every perspective adds to the conversation. If stories like this keep you questioning what really happened, subscribe to Unspoken Stories. Every case reminds us that the truth often hides in the silence between the words. And if you thought this mystery was unforgettable, wait until our next story, where one ordinary photograph becomes the only clue to a disappearance that remained unsolved for decades.